We're now in the AFC, and boy, we get to start off with a doozy in the AFC West. We get to start off with the team that I have power rated as the worst team in the AFC, followed by the defending Super Bowl champions. So, fun day here today on the show. We start with the Denver Broncos. Let's start there. Alex White, where last year they were one of the more perplexing teams in the NFL a year ago, where Denver is legitimately in the playoff hunt. They went on a road, beat Buffalo. They beat Kansas City.
Well, first they made history by giving up the most points in a game. And then they went on that run to make it into.
They were 0-3 and in a 21-point hole against Chicago in that game 4. And then season flip. Sorry to bring that game up, Ryan. I know you wanted to erase that game from your memory. But you're right. A horrible, historically bad defensive start.
Yes.
Because it wasn't just that 70. They gave up 35 to Sam Howell. They gave up 28 and 3/4 to the Bears. Wasn't necessarily the defense's fault, but the Jets did put 31 on them as well. So they were 1-4. 1-5, I should say. They were 1-5 because they lost to Kansas City the week after the Jets. They played that Thursday night, held them to 19. Then they beat 3 playoff teams in a row. They beat Green Bay. We didn't know we're that good at that time. They beat the Chiefs. They beat Buffalo. Then they beat Minnesota. They beat Cleveland, another playoff team mixed in there. And then the wheels came off. Lose to Houston, get pummeled on that Saturday night against Detroit, lose on Christmas to New England, and then Russell Wilson gets benched. So there you go with your additions and departures here. Russell Wilson's a Pittsburgh Steeler, the largest cap eat in the history of the National Football League. Just letting him go, releasing him, eating the money. It was clear Sean Payton couldn't stand him the whole year, even when they were winning games. Justin Simmons is gone. A lot of changes. Josie Jewell goes to Carolina. Jerry Jeudy traded to Cleveland. That's just scratching the surface. A lot of other defensive pieces were also traded as well or not re-signed in the offseason. On the additions, it's not a lot of fun. Brandon Jones, good replacement for Simmons. Rookie and Bo Nix. Zach Wilson is a backup, but maybe even a number 3 quarterbacks. Josh Reynolds is a wide receiver. Not much going on here with the additions here, Alex.
No, not at all. I think we're in the same ballpark here where I do think the Broncos are one of the worst AFC teams, if not the worst. You can't tell me that Bo Nix or Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham is going to be better than what they had with Russell Wilson, even though it wasn't Russell Wilson prime, and I know that they didn't get along. I mean, on the upside, Bo Nix will be a lot more coachable for him, so they have
you
that.
would hope.
But I don't have a lot of faith in this team. I actually have them only winning 4 games. I know their win total is sitting there at 5, so that's a tough number to even try and go under. But yeah, not a lot.
I didn't send you my notes because that was the exact number I had circled for them. 4, maybe even 3 for Denver here. Going into the season. By the way, the numbers on the right, Bo Nix, 18-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Patrick Surtain, they look, for a bad team, they do have some elite guys. Surtain is, to me, the second best corner in the National Football League. Only guy better sauce. Payton is a Hall of Fame coach, but again, it's not the same guy we saw in New Orleans. I like Cortland Sutton. Would not shock me if he ends up getting dealt at the trade deadline, if Denver is way out of it already. Garrett Bowles is a really good left tackle who could also be a guy they could consider moving, only 1 year left on his deal. So potential for some even in-season trades if things go awry here for Denver. If you go to the schedule, 5.5, as you mentioned, super low win total. Them in New England with the 2 lowest win totals in the AFC at 5.5. Look, the beginning of the schedule isn't too intimidating. That is the one counter argument to what you and I have here, Alex. Where you look at the left side of that schedule, they're an underdog at Seattle in the rematch of that ridiculous game we saw 2 years ago when Russ returned. The moment when we knew Nathaniel Hackett was well in over his head, even all the way in week 1. Pittsburgh at home, we know Denver, even though it hasn't worked out the last 2 years, we know historically speaking, Denver is usually a plus 60% number against the spread in the last 15 years. Even including last year where they didn't cover any of those first 3 home games. But they're usually really good early in the year. Teams struggle with that elevation in September when they're still figuring out their own bodies. back-to-back East Coast trips. There'll be a dog in Tampa. There'll be more than a touchdown in New York against the Jets. But then they get the 2 divisional games at home and Carolina mixed in week 8.
Yeah.
There is a path where Denver could be a surprise and be 4-4 through 8 games. There's a path.
Yeah.
Which then brings me to this. I brought it up last week. Books that offer in-season win totals are going to be your friend, and they should be your friend moving forward. If Denver gets out even 3-5, that number is going to jump. It may even jump to 7.5, which if it jumps to 7.5, with that second half of the schedule starting week 9 in Baltimore, good luck finding more than maybe 2 wins. So if you can find an in-season win total that goes north of 5.5 at any point, especially if we start touching 7.5, I mean, goodness, somehow a few years ago, we got Denver moving from a 7.5 to a 10.5 in season, despite winning 2 games they were favored in. If you get a bloated number in season, might be the best under to attack of anyone here, Alex.
I can't hate it at all, especially when I lean towards that under 5.5 already. Yeah. If I can get a better number than that, I will definitely be jumping in. Some other positives, I mean, they do have both coordinators coming back that they had last year with Joe Lombardi as the OC and Vance Joseph as the DC. But really, I mean, this team just struggled defensively so much they need to improve on. 29th in opponent yards per game, 30th in opponent rushing yards, and 23rd in opponent passing yards per game. 23% of opponent drives resulted in touchdowns. So it's really the defensive side of the ball that I'm concerned about. And then on top of that, we have new quarterbacks coming into play. So they would only look to the under. And as you're mentioning, if we can get a better number in season, I think that's the way to go.
Well, not only is it new quarterbacks, also but just look at the track record of the 2 guys on the roster. Wilson right now has to be regarded as one of the biggest busts in NFL draft history through his first few years. And Stidham's a backup. If Jarrett Stidham was your backup, I would feel comfortable. But the fact that Jarrett Stidham, through all the reports I've seen, Jarrett Stidham is trending to being the week 1 starter.
Yep.
That's not good. That's a problem. If Jarrett Stidham is your week 1 NFL starter, I'd almost be inclined, if I'm Denver, if it's even remotely close between these 3 guys, that I throw Nix in. Just say, you know what? Let him go. If we're 4-13 this year, it's fine. We're not ready to win anyway.
Right.
And Payton, look, Sean Payton has total security here. Unless if the locker room turns into a toxic mess and there's just other factors that doesn't allow Denver to keep Payton around, they probably can go 4-13 twice and Payton's not getting fired. So that would be the way that I would look. Again, this is, you and I are in agreement.
Yep.
I have them power rated 16th in the AFC and 31st overall. Only Carolina's behind them. And after doing a little bit more in Carolina like we did last week, it's a little bit even closer than I thought.
Yeah.
So this is on paper, bad football team. But I will preface this, Alex. The last 2 years, at least for my preseason ratings, there's been a team each year in the 30s for me that's made the playoffs. Because Seattle was in the 30s for me last year. They're a bottom 3 team. 2 years ago, they made the playoffs 2 years ago. Tampa was a bottom 3 team for me going into last year. They won the division. Now it was a weak division, but they still were in the playoffs and won a playoff game. So there's always chances for surprises. There's no such thing as a lock in the National Football League, as we know.
That is the only scary part, too, looking at that schedule right there, because yes, we expect even more regression from the Seahawks and even potentially the Buccaneers. But when you're just looking at quarterback against each other, I mean, you got Geno Smith and then we got Russell Wilson or Fields, Baker Mayfield, Aaron Rodgers. So I would take any of those first 4 quarterbacks over who we have with the Broncos. So might be a little bit tougher than we think, especially with 3 road games. But if they can get a couple from the Raiders, Chargers, and Panthers, then we'll be okay jumping in later for the win total.
By the way, these teams play in week 8, Carolina and Denver. That will be, I don't know if you did this, but just eyeballing it from here, Denver's maybe favored in 3 games this year. Maybe at most. Favored against Carolina week 8. Possibly favored in those 2 divisional games in week 5 and week 6 if the Chargers and the Raiders both get off the bad starts. Possibly. And then unless if the wheels fall off for the Colts,
Right.
which would be a lot of wheel falling off if that were to be the case. I don't see another game they're favored in. So maybe 3 on the high end actually here for Denver this year that they're favored in.
I agree. I think that sounds about right. And I mean, that could even switch because people have very high hopes
Could
for
very
the Chargers.
easily be 1.
Yes.
Could be 0 if Carolina is better than we think as well. I mean, not impossible.
It is not.
Which I can tell you right now, that would be a bet on Denver.
So-
That would be a bet on Denver if they're getting points at home against any of those teams.
With all that said, I didn't find any best bets just yet. Not offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, or coach of the year.
Oh, yeah, nothing.
Really just looking at that win total, trying to find the best number.
Yeah, it's fine. If you can find a 6, go ahead. I'd be comfortable laying juice, but if you get a quick start from this team, this is the best in-season under team that I can find now. Bo Nix is a lot better than we thought. It comes on like Herbert did his rookie year, then maybe we're sweating a little bit, but we'll see how it all plays out.